Hello everyone, welcome back. Wisteria here. This folklore story is called Morwen of the Woodlands, and it's a little bit longer than the others. I apologise for that, but still. It was in the days when Prince Benli was the Prince of Poets. He was a true prince of his time. He defended and extended the borders of poets. He was a strong leader, but a fair one. He was a man of action. He loved the song of battle and the thrill of the chase, but when at home in his hall, he liked nothing better than to go to the hunt. One day, Benny was out hunting. He started a white hart. Bentley, single-minded, pursued that hart, not noticing the other hunters fall away behind him. There was nothing in the world for him except that hart. His own heart beating in time with his horse's hooves as they pounded their way through the forest. The hart twisted and turned, leaping over fallen trees, diving under low branches, but still Ben Lee was hard on its heels. Deep, deep, deep into the forest they went, until something flickered at the corner of Ben Lee's eye. He turned his head, and there was nothing there. Again, there was something white amongst the shadows of the branches. The leaves around him seemed to jangle his name. He looked forward. The hart was gone. He looked back and realised his retinue had been outpaced. He was alone. Once more the flicker caught his eye, and as he turned, he saw that the white flicker was a dress. Inside that white dress was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her hair flowed thick and silky. It made his hands long to reach out and touch it. His eyes locked with hers, and the forest, his land, his life, everything fell away until she was the only thing in the world. He slid from his horse, his arms outstretched towards her, to pull this vision closer, but his arms closed around nothing. She was gone, and the light had fled from the forest. He stood there beguiled by her, a wistful smile at the memory of his encounter on his face. So it was that his friends and followers found him. Their clamour and familiar voices woke him from his reverie, and they made their way back, empty-handed, to Benley's hall. As soon as Benley slipped into sleep that night, she came to him again. Her face shimmered just as before, but every time he reached out, she slipped between his fingers. He woke in the grey half-light of dawn, stole down to the stables, saddled his horse, and was away. Throughout the day he searched the forest. His eyes hunted from root to trunk, trunk to branch, and branch to leaf, restlessly roaming the twilight beneath the trees for a glimpse of a white dress, the light falling on her silken hair. Then ahead of him there was a white flicker. Bentley's eyes brightened and he urged his horse onwards. But no matter how hard he spurred his horse or how fast they travelled, the flicker was always just ahead, tantalisingly close, until at last he cried out, "My lady, will you not wait?" She stopped, and his horse slid to halt. All you had to do, my lord, was ask. Her voice was like a cool breeze on a hot summer's day. Who who are you? Asked Bentley in wonder. You may call me Morwen of the Woodlands, she replied. Morwen, he repeated. Bentley tasted the name and found that it fitted well. Morwen, since I saw you yesterday, I have been able to think of nothing else. You have stolen my heart. Please, give me your hand in exchange. Morwen eyed up down this fella. But, Bentley, you already have a wife. The colour rose in Bentley's cheeks, and he returned. Yes, it's true, but it is many years since we wed. All is not well between us. I did love her once, but now I have seen you, and I could never love her as I love you. Morwen looked at Bentley long and hard, until at last she spoke. Very well, I will be your bride, but there are conditions. You must put your first wife away, and secondly, you must realize, Bentley, I am no mortal woman. I am one of the Turleftog, the fair folk. And although I will love with you, I must return to my people for one whole day each week, from sunrise to sunrise, and you must never, ever question me or try to follow me. If you will promise me this, I will be your wife. Bentley gladly consented. He swept her up into his arms, greatly lifted her upon the horse, and took his new bride home. When they arrived home, Bentley called for his first wife. But, though they searched high and low, she was nowhere to be found. Bentley assumed she had already heard the tidings and put herself out, and he put her out of his head. His every thought was saved for Morwen. The wedding was held that very day, in haste and joy. Bentley and Morwen made the perfect couple. People commented how well they were suited, and how it seemed as though they had known each other for years. Morwen knew Bentley's every mood. When he needed to laugh, when he needed quiet, when he wanted her by his side, and when he needed to be alone. Though it was rare, he did not wish Morwen to be with him. In those first few months, the only time Bentley was unhappy was the day each week when Morwen was gone. The hours dragged by until she returned home. Those long hours gave Bentley time to brood, and he began to wonder why she had to go back every week. Why once a fortnight or once a month would that not suffice? Why did she need to go back so often? And didn't she love him the way he loved her? Did she not feel the same at all? Tormented at this and at the thought of being parted, why did she never ask him to go with her? He wanted to show her off to the world, and yet he had never met any of her kin. So the seeds of doubt were planted, and slowly they grew worms that burrowed into dark places of his soul. They gnawed away at him until he was full of distrust and anger, that he could barely look Morwen in the eye when she was home. Bentley took himself away from his hall and away from Morwen. He took out his frustrations on the neighbouring princedoms, pushing back the borders and winning more land for powers. After one such campaign, the prince and his soldiers won a large piece of land to the south and returned to Benley's hall to celebrate. The hall was full of people, rich and poor alike, for the poor had fought shoulder to shoulder with the rich. All Benley's men were there, with their women at their side, but Benley stood alone. When he had arrived home, Morwen was nowhere to be found. She was in the woods and would not return until the next morning. Benley sat with the men, drinking and laughing with unsmiling eyes. There was another man at the table who did not have a woman by his side. His name was Wylan, and he was a monk, an honoured guest. Unbeknown to Benley and his abbey, his heart had been seduced by greed and envy, and he had become a sorcerer. Wylan kept his eyes fixed on Benley throughout the banquet. When the meal had been eaten, the guest carried on drinking, the men describing in detail the exploits of their latest win. Wylan made his way over to Benley and, taking his arm, guided him to a dark corner of the hall. "Your Highness, I see the clouds in your eyes. You have deep troubles. Will you not share them with me?" Benley looked into Wylan's dark eyes, and for the first time his lips unsealed and all his troubles came out, his fears, fantasies about Morwen, how she lived within his grasp, and yet he could not seem to hold her. Wylan listened to all Benley had to say. Then he did reply. "I can give you peace of mind, my prince, but peace of mind is the greatest gift that man can receive, and such it carries a high price. I can give you peace of mind, but in return you must promise the monks of the abbey a fee, and you must give me Morwen." Benley heard the promise, but not the price. He agreed. Wylan hurried out of the hall before the mead lost its effect and Benley could change his mind. Deeper and deeper into the woods he hastened, until, at nearly midnight, he came to the heart of the woods. He sat down in the undergrowth next to the heap of rocks and began to chant. "May Prince Benley be at peace. May Prince Benley have peace of mind, for he has promised the monks a gift, and myself also. For I shall have Morwen of the Woodlands. She must come to me at dawn at the abbey. There I will meet her and greet her, and make her my wife." On and on while enchanted through the night, until at last there was a glimmer of grey in the east, and the night was nearly over. Wylan rose to his feet and made his way toward the abbey. He reached the abbey in half light of near dawn, but something was there before him. Huddled on the steps of the abbey was a dark shape. It lifted its head, and Wylan saw the ugliest face he had ever seen. Greasy, straggly hair hung limp around a mass of warts and dirt lines, and in the centre, two bright black darting eyes. Wylan slowly edged a little closer, and he could make out long gangly limbs beneath the shapeless shift. "Wylan's," a dry, cracked voice called to him. "Wylan, come sit and wait with me." Wylan slowly made his way to the steps and sat at the other end from the hag. The sour smell of unwashed skin and musty clothes attacked his nostrils. "Good morning, Wylan. I know why you're here, and it is not yet quite dawn. Let me tell you a story while we wait. Once long ago, I was young and beautiful. Wylin snickered, but she continued. I was so beautiful that they called me the flower of poets. At that time, the prince, Benli, was also young and looking for a bride. It was only natural that I should be given to him. For a while, we were happy. I fell in love with that young man. I loved him truly. In his own way, he loved me too. But as the years went by, I lost my beauty, and with it, I lost Benli's love. In desperation like you, I turned to sorcery and magic. I turned to the fair folk and the Till of Teg. I made a bargain with them. For 6 days of the week, I would be young and beautiful once more. But for the 7th day, I should remain with them in the shape of a hag. And so with my new found beauty, I went once more to my lord. And again I won his heart. We have lived in contentment since then. But last night someone chanted an evil spell, pulling me from the fair folk before my day was spent. Now I am doomed to remain as a hag for the rest of my life. But come, Wylin, the sun is peeping over the hills. Its light touches our toes. It's time for us to wed. Wylin jumped up, his eyes wide and panicked. He backed away to the door of the abbey, his hands firm against the wood. He cried, May Prince Benli have peace. May you, Morwen, have peace. May I myself have peace. And God forgive me. He pushed the door open, threw himself inside, and slammed the door behind him. From that time, he turned his back on sorcery, and lived as a good monk should. Later that day, Benli was sat beside the fish pools. His head was still fuzzy, but with a turning stomach, he remembered more clearly what he had agreed with Wylin. He sat still, with his head in his hands, remorse, anger, and loss battling over him. He was losing control. Suddenly, something made him look up, and he turned and stared towards the woods. There, walking towards him, was a woman. He gazed at her. In this woman, he saw his old wife and new wife in one. He leapt to his feet and ran towards her. They held on to each other long and tight, and by the time they let go, peace had been made between them. From that time on, Benli and his wife were side by side, each and every day of the week, and they grew old together. Now when Benli looked at his wife, he didn't see the lines around her eyes, but the smiles that had made them. When he took her hand in his, he did not notice how time had knotted her fingers, but felt the strength she gave him. When their time came to them, as it must to all men and women, they were given the greatest blessing of all. For Benli and his wife died in their bed on the same night, and with their death came a sigh. There was a sound of grating rock, a rumble of moving earth, and slowly the hall began to sink. Deeper and deeper into the earth it sank. Then soft rain began to fall and covered the hall with water. The lake is still there. Lynch's Pool. It is tucked away, encircled by trees, but if you have the will, you can make it to see the beautiful lake. And if you manage to make your way down to the lake, sometimes you can catch a glimpse of the hall below. The pool is named for the hall drowned in its depths. A Lynchcliz, the swallowed caught, the end. Thank you for listening. I know that's a longer story, but well worth it, as I do like stories of the fair folk. So yeah, I enjoyed that one very much. Please leave a like, share if you can, and if you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Many blessings.